The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, often referred to as North Korea or Communist Korea, is often shunned by Western media. One might just say American, but it is also the Republic of Korean news networks, Japanese, West European, i.e., France, the UK, etc., and South Asian news networks, which all shun and lie about the DPRK. A major part of my channel is dedicated to stopping lies about former socialist or current socialist states. So now, I must defend claims that for once in a while, the DPRK has made against the United States regarding the George Floyd protests. Now, to be clear, I'm not defending the United States here. I am defending and showing the perspective of the DPRK claims. Now, what does the DPRK have to say about the United States and the George Floyd protests? A quote from the North Korean media goes to state that the United States is extremely racist. Now I quote. Pyongyang has not been alone in its critique of how Washington has handled the George Floyd protests, with many other states and unions voicing these same opinions, such as the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, the Republic of Syria, the Republic of Venezuela, the Republic of Cuba, the Republic of Vietnam, and the European Union. Even the United Nations High Committee on Human Rights have criticized the Washington government for its reaction. But this video is focused on the DPRK's perspective, so I'll cover that more in depth now. The central spokesperson for the International Department of the Workers' Party of Korea has publicly attacked the United States for its violent quelling of the relatively peaceful protests. WKK's International Department, which handles media and publications mostly, has also stated that while the American government claims that large portions of the protesters are violent, they have found no such reason to believe that these claims of large numbers are the actual case. If anything, it was found by the DPRK that the police and National Guard were the ones committing atrocities and violence against their own people on the ground. Another statement by the United States government was and continues to be that these protests and riots have been infiltrated by relatively left-wing groups like Antifa. The DPRK's government and press have yet to respond to this statement by Donald Trump. However, the facts are that the majority of the violence occurring in these protests is caused by right-wing forces, not of the left, of the right, fascists, Confederate collaborators, KKK, and MAGA Trump supporters. Another remark by the DPRK regarding President of the United States, Donald Trump, in the George Floyd protests was that, now I'm paraphrasing here, just to make that clear, the Trump administration is pursuing racially charged policies, and it was implied that this had always been the case. A quote from a popular DPRK's news network, the Rondong Sinum. Now, I apologize for my pronunciation there. I'm not Korean, and I do not claim to understand the Korean language very well. Stated a few lines. The first was on the protesters' perspective on the repression of Central American government is performing on their own people. I quote, demonstrators enraged by the extreme racist throng, even to the White House. This is the reality of the U.S. today. Another quote from the Rodong Sinmun, again, I apologize for the Koreans out there, covered the Washington's regime and its reply to the peaceful protests. American liberalism and democracy put the cap of leftists on demonstrators and threatened to unleash even dogs for suppression. This quote is in reference to a few things. One, that the U.S. is censoring its media and threatening the leftists in its own media with persecution should they cover these documents. And as we have seen, those supporters who have attempted to record police brutality during its protests are beaten and shot themselves. So Washington has not lied about its response. Secondly, the quote references how America will put dogs down onto its own population if it means suppressing the masses. Now, a small pause to talk about an inarguable proof that the DPRK media does allow for its different opinions that are contradicting or even against the central government and its ideology, which is that there have been those in the DPRK itself who have called out against the central government statements. Now, pause over, let's resume. Mike Pompeo had much to say about the DPRK's attacks on the United States response to the George Floyd protests. And this, along with some unofficial statements from Trump, can be called the United States' official response to the DPRK's statements. Mr. Pompeo has made remarks such as the threat posed by the People's Republic with its doctrine and its ideology, in reference to both the DPRK and the PRC. It's unclear whether it was specifically targeted at one, the other, or both. The DPRK calls this aggressive talk efforts to champion a West led coalition against socialist states like the DPRK and the Chinese Communist Party. Now, whether you believe China's ruling Communist Party to be communist or not is up for debate. That's your choice. The DPRK took this statement to be against China, however, still took it with anger considering their deep historical and ideological roots. The North Korean spokesperson responded to Pompeo's remarks with the following. Pompeo's nonsensical remarks indicate a similar strategy towards Pyongyang's band of socialism, which is evident enough that the DPRK clearly saw his remark as aggressive in nature. The spokesperson continued to call Pompeo's ignorant. Finally, he made a remark against Pompeo as so. Pompeo's description of the growing Chinese Communist Party, however, as an acknowledgement that its socialist path had become ever stronger. He also called Washington's undescribed top diplomat as nervous over the plight of the U.S. on the downhill slide. Another newspaper, this one operated by the North Korean cabinet, administered by the DPRK's legislation called the Minju Chosan. Again, I apologize for any Koreans out there. Immediately began covering George Floyd's death and the protests afterwards. Their conclusions were quick. Those conclusions being that this was systematic racism on the part of the United States of America and the police enforcements. Let me conclude with a statement from Comrade Kim Jong-un himself, revolving around the George Floyd protests and America's response to them. We recognize that the American police is one of many tactics used in the quest to control black people that have been ongoing since before the founding of the United States. We express our solidarity with those in the black community who have been affected by police brutality. As a nation, we are committed to working to dismantle systems of oppression and state-sponsored violence, especially when it is based on factors such as race and ethnicity. After 245 years of slavery, the African Americans deserve better treatment. A quote from Kim Jong-un.